My name is Eleanor Thompson, and at 67 years old, I never thought my only daughter Megan would tell me I was not welcome at her wedding. After spending $40,000 on her special day, those words shattered my heart into a million pieces. What happened next changed both our lives forever. I got into my car with my husband, canceled every payment, and drove away while my phone exploded with calls. Before I tell you this painful story, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more real-life stories like mine. I spent my entire life working hard to provide for Megan. As a nurse at the local hospital, I took extra shifts whenever possible, often working holidays and weekends to make sure she had everything she needed. My husband Frank worked as a high school math teacher, and between our modest salaries, we managed to create a comfortable life for our little family. We never had luxury vacations or designer clothes, but we had love, stability, and each other. Megan was such a sweet child growing up. She had these bright blue eyes that lit up whenever she laughed, and the most beautiful auburn hair that caught the sunlight like copper. I remember how she would make handmade cards for every occasion, even inventing her own holidays, just so she could create something special for us. On one Mother's Day, when she was just 8 years old, she saved her allowance for 3 months to buy me a small silver necklace with a heart pendant. I still wear it to this day. Our mother-daughter bond was something I treasured deeply. Every Sunday after church, we had our special brunch tradition. Just the two of us would go to Rosie's Diner on Main Street, where we would order chocolate chip pancakes and talk about everything and nothing. As she grew older, our conversations evolved from playground drama to boys, college dreams, and life aspirations. Once a year, we took a weekend shopping trip to the nearest city, spending hours trying on clothes and laughing at outrageous outfits we would never actually buy. When Megan went to college to study business, I missed her terribly, but I was so proud. She was the first in our family to attend university, and though the tuition stretched our finances thin, Frank and I never hesitated. We remortgaged our home to make sure she could focus on her studies without taking on too much debt. Every care package I sent included homemade cookies and a handwritten letter telling her how proud we were. During her final exams, I drove 4 hours each way just to drop off her favorite study snacks and give her a quick hug before driving back home for my night shift. Megan met Thomas during her senior year of college. He was studying finance and came from what I soon learned was considerable wealth. The first time she brought him home for Thanksgiving, he arrived in a car that cost more than our mortgage. He was polite enough complimenting my cooking and asking Frank about his teaching career, but there was something in his tone that felt condescending, as if our lives were a quaint exhibition of how the other half lived. Thomas's family owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states. His father had built the business from scratch, something I could respect, but his mother came from old money and never let anyone forget it. The few times we met before the engagement, Mrs. Wilson would make comments about our cozy home or ask if I had ever considered updating our vintage kitchen. Each word felt like a paper cut small but stinging. I noticed subtle changes in Megan after she started dating Thomas. Her calls home became less frequent. When she visited, she would comment on things like our furniture being outdated or suggest brands I should buy instead of my usual grocery store items. She started wearing clothes with visible designer logos and would check her phone constantly during our Sunday brunches, which became increasingly rare. Frank was more perceptive than I was about Thomas's influence. "He's changing her, Ellie," he would say, after Megan left from a visit. "She looks down on the life we gave her now." I would defend her, saying she was just growing up and finding her own path. Deep down, though, I worried he was right. Despite our concerns, when Megan called us one Sunday evening to announce her engagement, I was genuinely happy for her. All parents want their children to find love, and Thomas did seem to adore her. She sounded so excited on the phone describing the romantic proposal at a rooftop restaurant in the city, complete with roses and champagne. I pushed aside my reservations and focused on her happiness. Frank and I had been saving for retirement for years, building a modest nest egg that would allow us to travel a bit and live comfortably in our golden years. Without even discussing it between ourselves, first we offered to pay for Megan's wedding during that same phone call. The squeal of delight from my daughter made any financial sacrifice worth it. We had around $40,000 saved, and we decided all of it could go toward giving Megan the wedding of her dreams. "Mom, Dad, are you sure?" she had asked, knowing the significance of what we were offering. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied. "We've been saving for this day since you were born." That wasn't entirely true. We had been saving for our retirement, for potential medical expenses, as we aged for security in our final years. But in that moment, nothing seemed more important than making our only child happy on her special day. The first few weeks after the engagement were a whirlwind of excitement. Megan and I started a shared Pinterest board for wedding ideas, texting each other several times a day with photos of flowers, dresses, and venue options. We planned for a beautiful ceremony at our local church where Megan had been baptized, followed by a reception at the community center by the lake. Nothing fancy, but meaningful, and within our budget. Everything changed after the formal meeting with Thomas's parents to discuss wedding plans. The Wilsons invited us to their home, a sprawling mansion with a circular driveway and a fountain in the center. I wore my best dress and brought a homemade apple pie, a family recipe that Megan had always loved. Mrs. Wilson accepted it with a tight smile and immediately handed it to their housekeeper. "How quaint," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We usually order from Bellini's Bakery, but homemade island. Charming." The meeting took place in their formal dining room, around a table that could seat 20 people, Mr. and Formel. Wilson ordered in food from an upscale restaurant, and I noticed Megan seemed perfectly comfortable in this setting, as if she had spent considerable time there already. Mrs. Wilson had prepared a binder filled with wedding ideas, complete with a proposed budget that was nearly twice what Frank and I had offered. The Wilsons have always had their weddings at the Oakmont Country Club, Mrs. Wilson announced, sliding glossy brochures across the table. It would be a shame to break tradition. I glanced at Megan, expecting her to mention our discussions about the church ceremony, but she was nodding enthusiastically. "The country club is perfect," she agreed, avoiding my gaze. "They have a 6-month waiting list, but Mr. Peterson, the manager, is a family friend of the Wilsons." That was the first moment I realized our input would be limited in this process. Throughout the dinner, Mrs. Wilson dominated the conversation, speaking about designers and florists I had never heard of, while Mr. Wilson occasionally interjected with comments about which premium alcohol brands would be served. Frank remained mostly silent, his hand occasionally squeezing mine under the table when the projected costs were mentioned. Over the following weeks, Megan began siding with her future in-laws on every decision. Our local church was deemed too small and simple for the guest list, which had somehow grown from our proposed 75 people to over 200, most of whom were business associates and friends of the Wilsons that we had never met. The Lakeside Community Center was rejected, without even a visit, replaced by the Oakmont Country Club with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Each change came with significant price increases. The basic catering package at the country club started at $150 per person compared to the $35 per person we had budgeted with a local family-owned restaurant, the Flower Arrangements Mrs. Wilson insisted upon would cost as much as a used car. When I gently raised concerns about the mounting expenses, Megan looked at me with something like embarrassment in her eyes. "Mom, this is my only wedding. Don't you want it to be perfect?" Those words silenced my objections. Of course, I wanted her day to be perfect. So Frank and I met with our financial advisor and withdrew additional funds from our retirement accounts, accepting the penalty fees without complaint. We even took out a small home equity loan to cover the growing expenses, telling ourselves it was worth it to see our daughter happy. Meanwhile, Megan was changing in other ways, too. She had a new circle of friends, mostly from Thomas's social set. Young women with perfect highlights and designer handbags, who looked at me with polite disinterest when I was introduced at the engagement party. Megan seemed eager to fit in with them, adopting their mannerisms and even changing her accent slightly to match their polished way of speaking. One Tuesday afternoon, I took a rare day off work to join Megan for cake tasting, something I had been looking forward to for weeks. When I arrived at the bakery, I found Mrs. Wilson sitting with Megan, several empty sample plates already on the table. "Oh," Mom Megan said, looking surprised, despite our clear plans. "I thought you were working today." Mrs. Wilson stepped in to help. "We've already chosen the cake, actually." I stood there, purse clutched in my hands, feeling utterly superfluous. The hurt must have shown on my face because Megan quickly added, "But you can help with the table settings next week." That promise proved empty when the table settings were also decided without me. So were the invitations, the music selection, and even the menu. Each time there was an excuse why decisions had to be made quickly without waiting for my input. The final blow came when Megan went dress shopping without me. I had dreamed of that moment since she was a little girl, envisioning us both tearing up as she found the perfect gown. Instead, I received a text message with a photo of Megan already wearing her selected dress, standing next to a beaming Mrs. Wilson in some exclusive bridal boutique. "Mrs. Wilson knew exactly what would look best on me," the text read. "Hope you love it as much as I do." I cried that night alone in the bathroom so Frank wouldn't hear me. The next day I tried to talk to Megan about how excluded I felt from the wedding planning process. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory, but the conversation quickly turned defensive. "Mom, you don't understand how these things work in Thomas's circle," she said, stirring her latte absently. "There are expectations. Mrs. Wilson is just helping me navigate them. But this is your wedding, Megan, not Mrs. Wilson's. And we're your parents. We should have some input, especially since we're paying for everything." She looked up sharply at that. "Is that what this is about? The money Thomas's parents offered to pay, you know, but you and Dad insisted." That wasn't true. The Wilsons had never offered to contribute a single dollar, despite their obvious wealth. But arguing the point seemed petty. "It's not about the money," I said softly. "It's about feeling included in one of the most important days of your life." Megan's expression softened momentarily then. Her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced down, and whatever brief connection we had was lost. "I have to go," she said, gathering her things. "Florist emergency. I'll try to include you more." "Okay." But nothing changed. If anything, we were pushed further to the periphery of the wedding preparations. Frank suggested we stop payment on the remaining vendors until Megan and the Wilsons showed us more respect. But I couldn't bring myself to take such a drastic step. This was my only daughter's wedding. I would endure any slight, any hurt to make her day special. Or so I thought. As the wedding date approached, Megan's behavior toward us became increasingly dismissive, sometimes bordering on rude. During a family dinner at our home where I had spent all day preparing her favorite childhood foods, she barely touched her plate and spent most of the evening texting. When Frank asked about her work, a marketing position at a firm owned by one of Thomas's father's friends, she answered in monosyllables before changing the subject to the latest designer handbag she had purchased. $2,000 for a purse, Frank had asked, unable to hide his shock. That's more than our mortgage payment. Megan rolled her eyes. This is why I don't tell you guys about my life anymore. You always make me feel guilty for enjoying nice things. Thomas had chimed in then, his arm draped casually around Megan's shoulders. You shouldn't feel bad about rewarding yourself, babe. You deserve the best. The way he looked at us when he said it made it clear what category he thought we fell into, and it certainly wasn't the best. The Wilsons made no attempt to hide their disdain for our lifestyle. During one planning meeting at their home, Mrs. Wilson gave me a tour that felt more like an opportunity to highlight the differences in our living standards. Our kitchen was recently featured in Luxury Home magazine, she commented, gesturing around the cavernous space with its commercial-grade appliances. I imagine it must be difficult cooking in such a, what shall we call it, cozy kitchen as yours. Mr. Wilson was equally tactless. When Frank mentioned being excited about a fishing trip with his brother Mr., Wilson launched into a detailed description of his recent expedition on his private yacht, complete with hired staff and a chef. You should try real fishing sometime, Frank, he said, with a condescending smile, though I suppose pond fishing has its rustic charm. I could see Frank's jaw tighten, but he remained polite. Later in the car, he exploded. Those people think they're better than us because of their money, and Megan is starting to think the same way. I couldn't disagree, but I still held on to hope that our daughter was just temporarily caught up in the glitz and would eventually remember the values we had raised her with. The rehearsal dinner, traditionally hosted by the groom's family, was held at an exclusive restaurant where the menu had no prices listed. Frank and I felt out of place among the Wilsons' friends, all dripping in jewelry and discussing their recent travels to exotic locations. When we arrived, I was shocked to discover that instead of being seated at the main table with Megan Thomas and his parents, we were placed at a separate table near the kitchen with Thomas's elderly aunt and a few distant relatives. There must be some mistake, I said to the wedding planner, a sleek woman named Veronica, who had been hired by Mrs. Wilson. No mistake, Mrs. Thompson, she replied smoothly. The seating chart was approved by the bride and groom. Throughout the evening, I kept catching glimpses of Megan laughing and clinking glasses with the Wilsons and their friends. Not once did she come check on us or see if we needed anything. While waiting in line for the restroom, I overheard Mrs. Wilson speaking to another woman, not realizing I was around the corner. Eleanor's outfit is exactly what I expected, she said with a laugh. JCPenney's finest, no doubt. We'll need to make sure the photographer keeps her on the periphery of the formal shots. The woman with her tittered in response. At least you're handling all the planning. Can you imagine what this wedding would have looked like if they were in charge? Probably paper streamers and a sheet cake. I ducked into an empty hallway before they could see me, my cheeks burning with humiliation. When I returned to our table, Frank immediately noticed something was wrong. What happened? He asked quietly. Nothing, I lied, not wanting to create a scene. Just feeling a little out of place. That night in our hotel room, I finally broke down and told Frank everything I had overheard, as well as all the small slights I had been enduring silently for months. I don't understand what happened to our daughter, I sobbed. How could she let them treat us this way? We raised her better than this. Frank held me close, his own eyes damp. We should say something, stand up for ourselves. "But the wedding is tomorrow," I replied. "I don't want to ruin her day." "It's our day too, Ellie. We're her parents. And we're paying for this entire production, even though the Wilsons are acting like it's their show." In the end, we decided to put on brave faces and get through the wedding for Megan's sake. We would have a serious conversation with her afterward about her behavior and the influence Thomas and his family had over her. For now, we would smile and play our parts no matter how peripheral. That resolve was tested the very next morning when we received copies of the wedding program. I flipped through the elegant booklet, admiring the beautiful design, until I reached the page listing the parents of the bride and groom. There, in elegant script, were the names of Thomas's parents, Mr. and Mrs. James Wilson. Our names were nowhere to be found. I showed the program to Frank, whose face flushed with anger. Without a word, he marched down the hotel hallway to Megan's suite and knocked firmly on the door. When she answered, looking irritated at the interruption to her pre-wedding preparations, he held up the program. "Would you care to explain why your mother and I aren't listed as your parents in this program?" His voice was steady but strained. Megan glanced at the program and then shrugged. It was a design choice. The Wilsons have a certain aesthetic they wanted to maintain. "A design choice," Frank repeated incredulously. "We're your parents, Megan. Not a font or a color scheme that can be edited out for aesthetic purposes." "You guys just wouldn't understand their vision for this wedding," Megan replied coolly. "Everything needs to be perfect and cohesive. And we don't fit that vision." "Is that what you're saying?" Frank's voice had risen slightly, drawing the attention of a bridesmaid peering from inside the room. "Look, can we talk about this later? I'm getting married in 5 hours. Yes, you are. In a wedding that your mother and I have paid for entirely. A fact that seems to have slipped your mind." Megan's expression hardened. "If you're going to make this about money, then maybe you shouldn't come at all." The words hung in the air between them. Frank stared at our daughter for a long moment before turning away without another word. When he returned to our room, his face was ashen. "She doesn't want us there," he said simply. "Not really." "She didn't mean it," I insisted, though the knot in my stomach tightened. "She's just stressed. All brides are difficult before the wedding." But as I lay awake that night, I wondered if we had lost our daughter long before this moment. And I wondered what would happen when we arrived at the wedding the next day. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect June day that would have been beautiful for the simple lakeside ceremony we had originally envisioned. Instead, I found myself driving to the Oakmont Country Club, an imposing stone building surrounded by manicured gardens and a golf course that stretched to the horizon. Frank was silent beside me, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. We arrived 2 hours early, as I had promised to help with any last-minute details. The parking lot was already filled with luxury vehicles and bustling with staff carrying flower arrangements and champagne cases. I smoothed down my dress, a pale blue number I had splurged on for the occasion, and tried to ignore the butterflies in my stomach. At the entrance, a young woman with a clipboard stopped us. "Names, please." "Eleanor and Frank Thompson," I replied with a smile. "We're the bride's parents." She scanned her list with a frown. "I don't see you on the early arrival list. Only wedding party and immediate family are allowed in at this time." "We are immediate family," Frank said, an edge to his voice. "We're her parents." The woman looked uncomfortable. "Let me check with the wedding planner." Veronica appeared moments later, her expression professionally neutral. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, there seems to be some confusion." Megan indicated that her parents would be arriving with the general guests an hour before the ceremony. "That's ridiculous," I said, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. "I specifically told Megan I would be here early to help her get ready. It's tradition for the mother of the bride to assist with dressing. Veronica's smile didn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Wilson is already with Megan in the bridal suite. I'm sure you understand that we need to respect the bride's wishes on her special day. After some back and forth, we were reluctantly allowed inside, but directed to wait in the general reception area rather than join the bridal party. I sat on a stiff, ornate chair, fighting back tears, while Frank paced angrily across the marble floor. "This is unacceptable," he muttered. "We're being treated like distant relatives or business associates, not her parents." After 30 minutes of waiting, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew the general layout of the venue from previous planning visits and made my way toward the bridal suite. As I approached, I could hear laughter and music from inside. I knocked, gently. The door opened a crack, and one of Megan's bridesmaids peered out, champagne glass in hand. Her smile faded when she saw me. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson, did you need something?" "I'd like to see my daughter, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We're kind of in the middle of getting ready. Megan's having her makeup done right now." From inside the room, I heard Mrs. Wilson's voice. "Who is it, Ashley?" "It's Megan's." "It's Mrs. Thompson," Ashley replied, hesitating on how to identify me. There was a pause. Then Mrs. Wilson appeared at the door, glass of champagne in hand. "Eleanor, this is a bit unexpected. The bridal party is quite busy at the moment." "I just want a few moments with my daughter," I said firmly. "It's her wedding day." Mrs. Wilson's smile was tight. "Of course. Just give us a few minutes to finish her makeup, and then perhaps you can pop in briefly." The door closed in my face. I stood there humiliated for several minutes before it opened again. This time, I was allowed to enter. The suite was spacious and elegant, with Megan's bridesmaids scattered around in various stages of preparation. Megan sat at a vanity, a makeup artist, applying the finishing touches to her face. When she saw me in the mirror, she turned with a look of surprise. "Mom, I thought you were coming later." "I told you I wanted to help you get ready," I said, moving toward her. "You look beautiful." And she did. Her dress was exquisite, a fitted lace gown that flowed into a dramatic train. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, with a few tendrils framing her face. She looked like a stranger to me, like someone I had once known intimately, but who had transformed into a person I barely recognized. "Thanks," she said, turning back to the mirror. "Everything's under control here. Mrs. Wilson has been amazing handling all the details." Mrs. Wilson beamed at this acknowledgement, placing a proprietary hand on Megan's shoulder. "It's been my pleasure. After all, I always wanted a daughter to share these moments with." The comment stung like a slap. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small velvet box. "I brought you something. Your grandmother's pearl earrings. For your something borrowed." Megan glanced at the box without opening it. "Oh, that's thoughtful, Mom. But I'm already wearing the diamond earrings Mrs. Wilson lent me. They match the necklace Thomas gave me perfectly." Indeed, her ears sparkled with what must have been 3-carat diamonds. Mrs. Wilson smiled triumphantly over Megan's head, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Perhaps another time," she said smoothly. "Now, Eleanor, we really must continue with the preparations. The photographer wants some shots of Megan with her bridesmaids." I was being dismissed. Again. I placed the earring box on a side table and backed toward the door, watching as the bridal party closed ranks around my daughter, effectively shutting me out. In the hallway, I bumped into the wedding coordinator, a different young woman from the one with the clipboard earlier. "Excuse me," she said brightly. "Are you with the bride or groom's side?" "The bride," I replied. "I'm her mother." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, I'm so sorry. When Megan pointed you out earlier, she said you were a family friend. I should have realized." My heart stopped. She said I was a family friend. The coordinator looked mortified. I'm so sorry, I must have misunderstood. But I knew she hadn't. Something inside me broke at that moment. The months of subtle exclusion, of being pushed to the sidelines of my own daughter's wedding, crystallized into a sharp, undeniable reality. I wasn't just being excluded. I was being erased. I found an empty meeting room and slipped inside, needing a moment of privacy. Tears came freely now, sobs that I muffled with my hand. After a few minutes, I heard the door open, and I quickly tried to compose myself. It was Megan. She looked annoyed rather than concerned to find me crying. "Mom, what are you doing in here?" "The ceremony is starting in 45 minutes. The wedding coordinator just told me you described me as a family friend," I said, my voice shaking. "Your own mother. A family friend." Megan's expression shifted, a flash of guilt, quickly replaced by defensiveness. She misunderstood. Did she? Because from the moment we arrived, we've been treated like unwanted obligations. The programs don't list us as your parents. We were seated away from you at the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't included in any of the traditional mother-daughter wedding activities. So tell me, Megan, what am I misunderstanding? My daughter looked at me for a long moment, then sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. "Look, Mom, I need to be honest with you. You and Dad, you don't really fit in here." "Fit in? We're your parents." "Yes, but this wedding isn't just about family. It's about connections, networking, creating the right impression for Thomas's family and their circle. Do you know how many CEOs and board members are coming today?" I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So, we're an embarrassment to you, is that it?" Megan glanced at her diamond watch, a gift from Thomas. "I didn't want to have this conversation today, but since you're pushing it, yes, a little. You and Dad are great parents, but you're just so simple. You don't know how to act in these circles." "These circles," I repeated, my voice rising. "Megan, we raised you. We worked multiple jobs to put you through college. We're spending our entire retirement savings on this wedding. How dare you speak to us this way?" "That's exactly what I mean," she hissed, glancing toward the door, as if worried someone would hear. "You keep mentioning the money, making it transactional. The Wilsons would never be so crass." "The Wilsons aren't paying for anything," I exclaimed. "We are." "Yes, and I appreciate that. But honestly, Mom," Megan's voice dropped to a near whisper, "you're not really invited to the ceremony or reception. We just needed your money." The words hit me like a physical blow. I must have misheard. "What did you just say?" "Mrs. Wilson thought it would be best if you and Dad just attended the ceremony quietly and then left before the reception. You wouldn't fit in with the guests, and it would be uncomfortable for everyone." Thomas agrees. I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin around me. "You're uninviting us to your wedding after we paid for everything." Megan, at least, had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "You can still watch me get married. That's the important part. Right? But the reception is going to be very high society, and frankly, you and Dad would feel out of place." At that moment, the door opened again, and Frank stepped in. "Ellie, are you okay? I've been looking everywhere for you." One look at my face told him everything. "What happened?" he demanded. Through tears, I explained what Megan had just told me. Frank's face went from shocked to pale to flushed with anger in the span of seconds. "Is this true?" he asked our daughter, his voice dangerously quiet. Megan straightened her shoulders. Yes, and I'm sorry it came out this way, but it's for the best. You two just wouldn't understand the social dynamics at play here. Frank stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. We understand perfectly. You're ashamed of us. Of the people who raised you, who loved you unconditionally, who sacrificed everything to give you opportunities we never had. Dad, you're being dramatic. No, Megan. For the first time in this entire process, someone is being honest. Frank took my hand firmly in his. Let's go, Ellie. Where are you going? Megan asked, suddenly alarmed. The ceremony is starting soon. We're leaving, Frank replied simply. If we're not welcome at our daughter's wedding, then we certainly won't impose our presence. But you can't just leave, Megan protested. What about the payments? The vendors still need the final installments. Frank turned back, his expression cold. You're right. Thank you for reminding me. As we walked out, Megan called after us, You're overreacting, come back. But we didn't look back. Frank guided me through the venue and out to our car, his arm firmly around my shaking shoulders. As soon as we were inside, he pulled out his phone. What are you doing? I asked through my tears. His answer was simple, canceling everything. Sitting in our car in the country club parking lot, Frank methodically began making calls to every vendor who had not yet received final payment. His voice was steady and determined as he explained the situation to each one. We will not be making the final payment for our daughter's wedding, he told the catering manager. Yes, I understand this is last minute. No, this is not a joke. I sat beside him, still in shock, watching as he worked his way down the list we had in our shared wedding planning folder. The florist, the band, the photographer, even the officiant who was a friend of the Wilsons rather than our family pastor. One by one, Frank informed them that payment would not be forthcoming. The wedding planner, Veronica, called Frank's phone in a panic once word began to spread among the vendors. He put her on speaker. Mr. Thompson, there must be some mistake. Her voice was tightly controlled, but clearly stressed. The wedding is set to begin in 30 minutes, and I'm hearing reports that you've canceled payments to multiple vendors. There's no mistake, Frank replied calmly. My wife and I have been informed that we are not welcome at our daughter's wedding reception, despite paying for the entire event. So we've decided to withdraw our financial support. There was a long pause before Veronica spoke again, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. Mr. Thompson the first. I had no idea. That's not what Megan told me. What did she tell you exactly? I asked, finding my voice. Another pause. She said you had agreed to a limited role in the wedding because you were uncomfortable with formal events. She said it was your preference to be less visible. Frank and I exchanged glances. Another lie. Well, now you know the truth, Frank said. We've been systematically pushed aside and finally explicitly uninvited by our own daughter. I think you can understand why we're not feeling particularly generous right now. Of course, Veronica said, and I was surprised to hear what sounded like genuine sympathy in her voice. I'm truly sorry this happened. For what it's worth, I've worked with many families, and what Megan did Island. It's not right. After ending the call with Veronica, we sat in silence for a moment. Then my phone began to buzz. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call. It immediately rang again. This time I turned it off completely. Frank's phone started ringing next. It's the venue manager, he said, answering. The conversation was brief but revealing. The manager, a man named Patrick, was surprisingly understanding once Frank explained the situation. I've been in this business for 20 years, Mr. Thompson, and unfortunately, I've seen this kind of thing before. Not often, thank God, but it happens. Weddings bring out the worst in some people. What will happen now? Frank asked. Without the final payment, we can't provide the full services contracted. The ceremony space is already set up, so that could technically proceed, but the reception catering bar service, all of that would be canceled. The Wilsons would need to provide immediate payment if they want to proceed. Frank thanked him for his professionalism and ended the call. "Should we go home?" I asked, feeling suddenly exhausted. "Yes," Frank said simply. "There's nothing more for us here." As we drove away from the Oakmont Country Club, my phone continued to vibrate in my purse with incoming calls and messages. Frank turned on the radio to drown out the sound, and we drove in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. When we arrived home, I finally turned my phone back on to a flood of notifications: 32 missed calls, 26 voicemails, 48 text messages. The calls were from Megan Thomas, both of the Wilsons, and various unknown numbers that I assumed were vendors or members of the wedding party. I listened to the first voicemail. It was from Thomas, his voice tight, with barely controlled anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just cancel everything. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? My parents are furious. Call me back immediately." The second was from Mrs. Wilson, practically hissing into the phone. "Your behavior is absolutely disgraceful, Eleanor. I always told Megan, you people couldn't be trusted to handle something of this magnitude. You've ruined everything with your pettiness." The third was from Megan, and despite everything, my heart clenched at the sound of her crying. "Mom, Dad, please come back. I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. Please turn your phones on. Everything is falling apart here." I couldn't listen to any more. I put the phone down and looked at Frank, who was sitting in his recliner staring blankly at the wall. "They're all blaming us," I said quietly. "Of course they are," he replied. "It's easier than accepting responsibility for their actions." "Megan sounds upset." Frank's expression softened slightly. "She is upset. But is she upset because she hurt us, or because her perfect day is ruined?" I didn't have an answer to that. We sat in silence as the afternoon wore on both of us, emotionally drained. Around 6 o'clock, when the wedding reception would have been in full swing, our doorbell rang. It was our neighbor Judy, holding a casserole dish. "I heard what happened," she said gently. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it. Thought you might not feel like cooking tonight." Word had spread quickly. Judy came in and sat with us while we picked at the food offering, quiet support without judgment. She confirmed that another neighbor had a daughter who worked at the country club and had witnessed the chaos that ensued after our departure. Apparently, the Wilsons were scrambling to pay the vendors directly, Judy reported. Some agreed, some didn't. The florist refused to release the flowers without payment in full. The caterer would only provide a limited menu. Half the servers walked out when their payment was in question. I should have felt vindicated, perhaps even satisfied that the Wilsons had experienced consequences for their behavior. Instead, I just felt hollow. This should have been one of the happiest days of our lives, watching our daughter get married. Instead, it had become a nightmare of betrayal and public humiliation. Over the next few days, more details emerged through our community network. The wedding had proceeded in a significantly scaled-back form. The ceremony happened with borrowed flowers from the country club gardens. The reception was a limited affair with a cash bar and appetizers instead of the 5-course meal we had paid for in advance. Many guests left early, confused by the obvious tension and underwhelming festivities. Various vendors contacted us, expressing their support and confirming they had refused to provide services without payment. The florist, a kind woman named Rose, who had worked with me extensively before being sidelined by Mrs. Wilson, called personally. "I want you to know I removed every arrangement when they couldn't pay," she told me. "I've been in business 30 years, and I've never seen parents treated the way you were. It wasn't right." The caterer photographer, and even the band all made similar calls. In a small community like ours, relationships mattered, and word had spread quickly about how we had been treated. Many of these vendors had known us for years, had watched Megan grow up. Their solidarity was a small comfort in a devastating time. The day after the wedding, we consulted with a lawyer friend about the legal implications of our actions. He assured us we were within our rights to cancel payments for services not yet rendered, especially given the circumstances. "They could try to sue you for breach of contract," he explained, "but given that you were explicitly uninvited from the event you were paying for, they wouldn't have much of a case. And frankly, I doubt they'd want this story aired in court." He was right. Despite Thomas's initial threats of legal action, no lawsuit materialized. Instead, according to mutual friends, the Wilsons quickly moved to do damage control within their social circle, framing the wedding disaster as the result of our mental instability rather than their daughter's cruel rejection. Through it all, Frank was my rock. He held me when I cried, reminded me to eat when I lost my appetite, and assured me repeatedly that we had done nothing wrong. We gave her everything he would say: our love, our support, our savings. We drew the line at giving up our dignity. I knew he was right, but the pain of Megan's betrayal cut deep. I kept replaying her words in my mind. "You're not really invited. We just needed your money." How had we raised a daughter capable of such callousness? Where had we gone wrong? 3 days after the wedding, we were having a quiet breakfast when the doorbell rang. Frank answered it, and I heard Megan's voice in the entryway. My heart leaped, despite everything but, when she entered our kitchen, her expression was not one of remorse, but of barely contained fury. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded without preamble. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? People are still talking about it. The Wilsons' friends are calling it the wedding disaster of the year." I stared at her in disbelief. "How could we do this to you, after what you said to me?" I was stressed. It was my wedding day. Brides say things they don't mean all the time. Frank set down his coffee cup with deliberate calmness. "Telling your parents they're not invited to your wedding isn't a stress reaction, Megan. It's a choice you made. A choice that reflected how you truly feel about us." "That's not fair," she protested, dropping into a chair. "Mrs. Wilson was putting all this pressure on me. She had expectations about how everything should be. She kept saying that you guys wouldn't understand the social implications, that you'd embarrass me without meaning to." "And you believed her," I said quietly. "You chose her opinion over your relationship with us." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Frank asked. "Explain to us exactly what happened that made you decide to uninvite your own parents from your wedding reception." Megan's eyes filled with tears. They kept saying things about how you guys weren't sophisticated enough, how your clothes weren't right, how you wouldn't know which fork to use for the fish course, how Dad would probably make some inappropriate blue-collar joke during the toasts. And instead of defending us, you agreed with them, I concluded. "I didn't know what to do," Thomas kept saying. His family's connections were important for our future, that this wedding was like a business investment, that his parents' approval meant everything for his career prospects. Frank leaned forward. "Megan, listen to yourself. You're talking about your wedding day, the celebration of your love and commitment, as a business investment. Is that really the foundation you want to build your marriage on?" Something in his words seemed to reach her. For a moment, the defensive anger drained from her face, replaced by confusion and doubt. "I don't know what happened to the daughter we raised," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "The girl who made cards for the elderly in our neighborhood, who saved her allowance to buy Christmas gifts for her friends, who stood up to bullies in high school when they picked on kids with disabilities." "I'm still that person," Megan insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "No," Frank said firmly. "That person would never have treated her parents the way you treated us. That person understood the value of family, of loyalty, of basic human decency." "So, what are you saying? That you're disowning me?" Megan's voice rose in panic. "No one is disowning anyone," I assured her. "We will always love you, Megan. You're our daughter. But love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. So what do you want from me?" "We want you to really think about who you've become," Frank said. "About whether the approval of people like the Wilsons is worth sacrificing your relationship with the people who have loved you unconditionally your entire life." Megan was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that shocked me. "They convinced me you weren't good enough. That I came from common stock. That if I wanted to truly be accepted in their world, I needed to distance myself from my origins. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. And you believed them." "I didn't want to," she whispered, "but they're so confident, so certain about everything. They made it sound like they were helping me, like they were saving me from embarrassment." Megan Frank said, his voice gentler. "Now I think you should leave. Not because we don't love you, but because you need time to think about what's really important to you. And we need time to heal from the hurt you've caused us." "You're kicking me out." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "No, we're asking for space. There's a difference." I reached across the table but stopped short of touching her hand. "When you're ready to talk to us with genuine remorse and understanding of what you did, we'll be here." Megan stood up, anger replacing the brief vulnerability she had shown. "Fine. I see how Island Thomas was right about you two all along." As she stormed toward the front door, it opened before she reached it, revealing Thomas standing on our porch. He must have been waiting in the car. "Well," he demanded, looking past her to where Frank and I now stood in the hallway. "Did they agree to reimburse my parents?" Megan looked confused. "What? No, we didn't even discuss that." Thomas pushed past her into our home without being invited. "Listen," he said, addressing Frank directly, "my parents had to put down their credit cards for $30,000 to salvage what was left of our wedding. You need to pay them back." Frank crossed his arms. "I don't believe we owe your parents anything, Thomas. In fact, given the circumstances, I think they got off rather lightly." Thomas's face flushed red. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? My father has connections with every major business in this state. He could ruin you with one phone call." "Is that a threat?" Frank asked calmly. "It's a reality check, old man. You can't mess with the Wilsons and expect to walk away unscathed." I had remained silent, watching this exchange with growing horror. This was the man our daughter had married. This entitled, threatening person who thought nothing of barging into our home and attempting to intimidate us. "Thomas," I said quietly, "I think you should leave now." He turned to me with a dismissive glance. "Stay out of this. The men are talking." That was when Frank stepped forward, his patience finally at an end. "That's my wife you're speaking to. In our home. You will address her with respect, or you will leave immediately." Or what Thomas scoffed. The front door was still open, and our next-door neighbor, Sam, who had been mowing his lawn, had stopped his mower and was watching the confrontation with concern. Other neighbors had also paused their weekend activities, drawn by the raised voices. "Is everything okay over there?" Frank Sam called. Thomas glanced outside, suddenly aware they had an audience. His demeanor changed instantly, the mask of civility dropping back into place. "This isn't over," he said in a low voice. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer." He took Megan's arm and practically pulled her outside toward his car. She went without resistance, not looking back at us once. As they drove away, our neighbors gathered around, offering support and concern. The story of what had happened at the wedding had spread throughout our community, and people were indignant on our behalf. Sam's wife brought over coffee. The Andersons from across the street invited us for dinner. Mrs. Patel, from 2 doors down, promised to bring her famous curry the next day. In the midst of our pain, we were reminded that we were not alone. We had built real relationships in this community over decades, connections based on mutual respect and genuine caring rather than social climbing or financial advantage. Over the next few weeks, we learned more about how the Wilsons were spinning the wedding disaster. Through mutual friends and community connections, we heard they were telling anyone who would listen that we had suffered some kind of mental break, that we had always been unstable and unpredictable. Some people believed them, particularly those in their exclusive social circle who had never met us. But many others, especially those who had known us for years, saw through the lies. Several guests from the wedding reached out to express their support, including Thomas's own grandmother, a gracious woman who sent us a handwritten letter. "I have known my son and daughter-in-law for over 40 years," she wrote, "and I recognize the pattern of behavior you experienced. Please know that not all of us condone their actions or their influence over your daughter. I pray that in time Megan will recognize the true value of the parents who raised her with such love." That letter brought me to tears, a small beacon of hope that perhaps not all was lost. 10 days after the confrontation at our house, we received a formal letter from the Wilsons' attorney demanding repayment for the expenses they had incurred to remedy the situation caused by your capricious withdrawal of funds. Our lawyer friend reviewed it and prepared a response that outlined in clear, unemotional terms exactly why we had canceled payments and how the Wilsons' threats could constitute harassment. "Don't worry," he assured us. "This is just bluster. They don't want this story becoming public record in a courtroom." He was right. After our response, the legal threats ceased. We heard through the grapevine that even some of the Wilsons' friends had questioned their version of events, finding it hard to believe that parents would cancel their daughter's wedding payments without extreme provocation. Meanwhile, we saw on social media that the wedding had been officially celebrated after all. The Wilsons had apparently thrown a lavish reception redo at their estate 2 weeks after the original date, framing it as an exclusive celebration for select guests. The photos showed Megan smiling in her wedding dress, surrounded by the Wilsons and their friends. In one image that particularly broke my heart, Mrs. Wilson stood where I should have been adjusting Megan's veil, with a triumphant smile. Another woman had taken my place as mother of the bride, and my daughter had allowed it, encouraged it even. Frank found me crying over those photos and gently closed my laptop. "Don't torture yourself, Ellie. She's made her choice for now. All we can do is hope that someday she'll remember who she really islanded." But as days turned into weeks with no word from Megan, I began to wonder if we had lost her forever. The first 3 months after the wedding were the darkest of my life. I went through the motions of daily existence, working my shifts at the hospital, preparing meals, maintaining our home, but inside, I felt hollow. Frank suggested I talk to someone professional, and though I initially resisted, I eventually agreed to see a therapist. Dr. Carter was a compassionate woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma. In our sessions, she helped me understand that my grief was legitimate, that what Megan had done was a form of betrayal that would take time to process. "You're mourning," she explained during one session. "Not a death, but the loss of the relationship you thought you had with your daughter. The loss of the future you imagined together. Grandchildren's birthdays, holiday gatherings, all the moments you expected to share." "Will it always hurt this much?" I asked. "No," she promised. "The pain doesn't disappear, but it changes. It becomes something you carry rather than something that consumes you." Slowly, with Dr. Carter's guidance and Frank's unwavering support, I began to rebuild my life. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during the months of wedding planning. I joined a community garden project I had always been interested in but never had time for. I found joy again in small pleasures, a beautiful sunset, a good book, an evening walk with Frank. Frank had his own way of processing. He spent more time fishing with his brother, finding peace on the water. He started mentoring a young teacher at his school, channeling his paternal instincts into helping someone who appreciated his guidance. Together we began planning the trip to the Grand Canyon we had always talked about, but had postponed to pay for Megan's wedding. "We should use that money for ourselves now," Frank said one evening as we looked at travel brochures. "We've earned it." It felt selfish, at first repurposing what we had thought of as Megan's wedding fund for our own enjoyment. But as Dr. Carter reminded me, taking care of ourselves wasn't selfish, it was necessary. 4 months after the wedding, we received an unexpected letter. It wasn't from Megan, but from Thomas's grandmother, the same woman who had written to us earlier. She requested to meet us for coffee if we were willing. Curious and touched by her previous kindness, we agreed. Margaret Wilson was in her 80s, a dignified woman with kind eyes that held none of the coldness of her son and daughter-in-law. We met at a quiet cafe, and after brief pleasantries, she came straight to the point. "I want to apologize again for my family's behavior," she said, her hands wrapped around her teacup. "What they did to you and what they encouraged Megan to do was unconscionable." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved. "That means a lot. I've tried to talk to them to make them see how wrong they were, but they're set in their ways." She sighed deeply. "My late husband and I built the business from nothing. We knew the value of hard work, of integrity. Somewhere along the way, my son lost sight of those values." "Why are you telling us this?" Frank asked gently. Margaret looked at us directly. "Because I want you to know that not everyone in Thomas's family supports what happened. And because I thought you should know that Megan and Thomas are having difficulties." My heart clenched. "What kind of difficulties?" "The kind that come when a marriage is built on appearances rather than genuine connection," Margaret said sadly. "Thomas has always been indulged, given everything he wanted, without earning it. Megan is discovering that being a Wilson wife comes with expectations she may not have anticipated." We didn't press for details, but in the following weeks, we heard through mutual friends that all was not well in the newlyweds' household. Thomas was apparently rarely home, spending most evenings at his club or on business trips that seemed suspiciously recreational. Megan had been seen arguing with Mrs. Wilson at charity functions, no longer the compliant daughter-in-law she had been before the wedding. I took no pleasure in these reports. Despite everything, Megan was still my daughter, and I hated the thought of her unhappy. But I also recognized that these were natural consequences of the choices she had made, lessons she perhaps needed to learn on her own. 6 months after the wedding disaster, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang with Megan's number. I stared at it for several rings, my heart pounding before answering. "Mom." Her voice sounded small, tentative, nothing like the confident, dismissive tone she had used the last time we spoke. "Yes, Megan. Can I come over? To talk?" I closed my eyes, fighting the surge of conflicting emotions. Yes, Dad will be home around 5. Actually, I was hoping to talk to just you first. Is that okay? I agreed, and 2 hours later, I opened our front door to find a very different Megan than the one who had left our house in anger half a year earlier. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. The highlighted hair and perfect makeup were gone, revealing dark circles under her eyes and a pallor to her skin that concerned me. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we had had our confrontation months before. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Megan began to cry quiet tears at first that soon became racking sobs. Without thinking, I moved to her side and put my arms around her maternal instinct, overriding the walls of self-protection I had built. When she could speak again, the words poured out of her. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I've been terrible, horrible. What I did to you and Dad was unforgivable. I don't even know who that person was who could say such cruel things to the people who gave her everything." "What happened, Megan?" I asked, returning to my seat. "What changed?" She wiped her eyes. Reality happened. After the wedding, once the Wilsons had shown their generosity by saving the day they expected complete loyalty from me, Mrs. Wilson Diana started dictating everything from how I should decorate our house to when we should start trying for a baby. Mr. Wilson got Thomas a position at the company that came with strict expectations about socializing with the right people, attending the right events. And Thomas. Megan's expression hardened slightly. Thomas turned out to be exactly who Dad thought he was. Once we were married, once he had me, the charming facade dropped. He's controlling, condescending, and rarely home. When he is, he criticizes everything from my cooking to my appearance. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. No matter what she had done, I would never wish that kind of marriage on my daughter. "Don't be," she replied, surprising me. I needed to see the truth about Thomas, about the Wilsons, about the kind of life I thought I wanted. She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close. "Most of all, I needed to see the truth about how I treated you and Dad. How I threw away the most genuine love I've ever known for the approval of people who only cared about appearances." "Why now?" I asked. "Why come back after 6 months?" Megan took a deep breath. 2 reasons. First, I've been in therapy for the past 3 months, trying to understand how I could have changed so much, how I could have hurt you both so deeply. My therapist helped me see that I was trying to escape what I saw as the limitations of my upbringing, that I was ashamed of being from a normal middle-class family instead of recognizing the incredible value in how you raised me. And the second reason, last week I found out Thomas has been having an affair with his secretary. Classic right. She gave a bitter laugh. When I confronted him, he basically said, that's just how things are done in his circle. That as long as I had my credit cards and social status, I shouldn't complain. That's when I realized I had traded genuine love and respect for a complete sham. We talked for hours until Frank came home and joined the conversation. Megan repeated her apologies to him, acknowledging how deeply she had hurt him with her rejection and cruel words. Frank was more cautious than I was, listening carefully, but maintaining emotional distance. "I want to believe you've changed, Megan," he said finally. "But trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. It will take time." "I know," she nodded. "I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I don't deserve that. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I really am again, who I want to be." Over the following months, Megan proved her sincerity through consistent actions rather than just words. She left Thomas filing for divorce, despite the Wilsons' threats to cut her off financially and socially. She moved into a small apartment, found a job at a local marketing firm on her own merit, and continued her therapy. Most importantly, she rebuilt her relationship with us step by step. Sunday brunches at Rosie's Diner resumed, though they were awkward at first. She joined us for dinner once a week, gradually sharing more about her life and genuinely listening to ours. She volunteered alongside me at the community garden and went fishing with Frank, activities she would have dismissed as beneath her during her time with Thomas. When her divorce was finalized, a year after the wedding, Megan faced social rejection from the Wilsons' circle, but discovered that real friends, the kind who cared about her as a person rather than her social status, remained loyal. Some were new colleagues from work, others were childhood friends she had neglected during her relationship with Thomas. I won't pretend the healing process was easy or complete. There were setbacks, moments when old hurt resurfaced, times when Frank or I would pull back, still wary of being hurt again. But gradually we established a new relationship with our daughter, one based on mutual respect and honest communication rather than obligation or expectation. The most profound lesson I learned through this painful journey was about the true nature of love and family. Real love isn't about status or appearances. It isn't contingent on social approval or financial advantage. Real love perseveres through disappointment and even betrayal. It holds space for growth and forgiveness without sacrificing self-respect or boundaries. Megan learned her own lessons. I thought I wanted what the Wilsons had. She told me once the prestige, the connections, the sense of being above ordinary concerns. But their wealth couldn't hide the emptiness of their relationships, the coldness at the heart of their family. What you and Dad gave me was so much more valuable, though I was too blind to see it. Today, 2 years after that disastrous wedding day, our family has found a new equilibrium. Megan is thriving in her career, dating occasionally, but focused primarily on her own growth and healing. Frank and I did take that Grand Canyon trip, followed by others to places we had always dreamed of seeing. We're enjoying our retirement years with a deeper appreciation for what truly matters, the authentic connections that sustain us through life's challenges. As for the Wilsons, we hear they're still hosting lavish parties and cultivating their social image. Thomas remarried quickly to someone from their circle, a union that appears perfect on social media, but which Thomas's grandmother confides is as empty as his first marriage. I feel no animosity toward them anymore, only a kind of distant pity for people who measure their worth by such hollow standards. The pain of that wedding day will always be part of our family story, a scar that reminds us of both tremendous hurt and remarkable healing, but it no longer defines us or our relationship with our daughter. What defines us instead is the journey we took together afterward, the difficult work of rebuilding trust, the courage to be vulnerable again after betrayal, and the discovery that true family bonds, though they may bend under pressure, can find their way back to strength and love. If you're facing a similar situation with a loved one who has hurt you deeply, I hope our story offers some comfort and perspective. Sometimes the most painful ruptures create space for more authentic connection. Sometimes people do change, do recognize their mistakes, and genuinely work to make amends. And sometimes the love you've invested in someone does eventually bear fruit, even if the harvest comes much later than you expected. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that eventually led to healing and reconciliation, or are you still in the painful middle of such a journey? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Thank you for listening, and remember that even in our darkest moments, growth and renewal remain possible.